Well, I'm a Mac developer, and I think the ideas that are in the software on the Lisa are just fascinating. You can run the software in an emulator, but I like the experience of seeing how things worked on the original hardware, when they were new. I like hearing the hard drive spin up. I like waiting 5 minutes for the thing to boot because it's slow. Um, I like feeling like somebody would have felt when they were using one new. I noticed that when the Lisa's running, it's loud. There are fans. The widget hard drive is cranking away, and it's not silent. And you know, I actually think that's interesting because even from the very beginning, Apple seemed to care a lot about silence. And I think the Lisa was such a powerful machine that they couldn't do it right. They couldn't get what they needed feature wise in sort of a silent fanless kind of computer. Yeah, I'm quite an Apple collector, so focused on the Mac and the Apple II. I like Next computers as well. I kind of consider those like honorary Apple computers.
Any other non-Apple that you have in your
Yeah,
collection?
I've got a few. I've got an Altair 8800, and a Commodore 64, of course, and then I've got a Timex Sinclair, which is interesting because it was $100, and it was the first computer under $100, and so there's quite a contrast there between that computer and you know almost any other machine, but certainly something like the Lisa, which was $10,000. Well, so this is actually a really interesting question. I think a lot of people think the Lisa is a failed platform. It's a computer that came out and was a big flop and it meant nothing to history. And I actually don't think that's true. I think particularly when you look at the software in the Lisa, so much of what's there, of course, informed the Mac, but there are also things that I think only now we're really like thinking through uh, and bringing into modern software. One of the things I think about when I think about the Lisa and its software is the error messages, which seems like a maybe silly thing, but the Lisa just has these excellently written, friendly, descriptive error messages. It's not error code 603, operation failed. It tells you exactly what's wrong and how to fix it in friendly terms that anybody can understand. So one thing that's different about the Lisa and the Mac that came a year later is that the Lisa is document centric. The whole UI is built around documents, and I think the Mac and therefore every graphical user interface operating system that has become popular since then is application oriented. So you open up an app, and then you may use that to manipulate documents, but the app is sort of at the center of that model. On the Lisa, everything revolves around documents. If you want to create a new, word processing document, you double click on the word processing document pad, and it sort of tears off a new sheet, a new document for you, and opens that up. And you don't really think about the fact that it's opening in Lisa Write. Lisa Write is not the star of the show. Your content, your documents are the star of the show. I think that's an interesting idea that sort of takes the desktop metaphor of the graphical user interface a step further than even now Mac OS 10 or something does. I find that innovative thinking. Frankly, I think it's a little sad that we sort of lost some of that because I think people put a lot of thought and care into that. When talking about the Lisa again, people know that it was $10,000 and that it was a flop and that maybe it was named after Steve Jobs' daughter. They don't know that it had a really pretty high-end modern preemptive multitasking protected memory operating system that was ahead of its time and that we didn't see on the Mac for it was some of those features, protected memory and preemptive multitasking, we didn't see for 20 years after the Lisa was a supposed flop, right? And it did those things so well. I think another interesting thing about the Lisa that's maybe a side note, but it ran Xenix. It ran a version of Unix. That was a third-party product. It was a Microsoft product, if I recall. It was a powerful machine. It was not a piece of junk. It was something that you would buy to get real work done on. And in many ways, the Mac, which came out a year later, was a stripped down Lisa, but it was stripped down in in a lot of serious ways, which made it so that it was cheap enough to be successful. It also meant that we lost a lot of what really made the Lisa special. Yeah, I do think of the Lisa as sort of an honorary Mac. It was the first Apple computer with a mouse and with a graphical user interface, And a lot of the ideas, either directly or indirectly, in that interface, of course, made it into the Mac. There was even some software, particularly QuickDraw, which is the software system for doing drawing on the screen. That made it that's one of the few things that was excuse me, that was in the Lisa and in the Mac. I have thought about that, and I wasn't there. I think Steve Jobs turning his attention from the Lisa to the Mac can't have helped. But quite frankly, it was a $10,000 machine in 1983. The price dropped a little bit in 1984, but still, we were talking. It was not something the average person could justify buying, and it's especially with Apple being sort of, even at that time, a computer that was supposed to be for everyone. It's a little bit hard to sell enough to actually make something worth it if you're $10,000 in 1983. Yeah, the price came down over time, but I think there was probably also a little bit of a perception, but both in Apple and outside of Apple. By that time, by the time the price was cut and it's selling well as a Mac, well, it's selling well as a Mac, not a Lisa. So they're not going to continue the Lisa, right? It's a glorified Mac.
It definitely was a
right?
dead end.
Yeah.
That probably put no more research dollars into
Right.
it.
Yeah, which is actually pretty cool from a design standpoint. Here's this machine that was not designed with the Mac in mind. It was a separate project from the Mac, and yet they were actually able to repurpose it with very minimal hardware changes into being a Mac. It had the same CPU, which helped them a lot. But I've always thought that was kind of interesting because the Mac was very much a purpose-built device. It was not built with Lisa compatibility in mind either, and yet the Lisa was a powerful enough machine that MacWorks worked, and that's pretty cool. Yeah, so my Lisa, I actually think the history of my Lisa is interesting. I got it in 2015 or so from somebody who from somebody whose grandpa owned it, and the original owner had recently died, and the machine had apparently stopped working a couple of years before he died, but up until that point he had been doing his taxes on it every year. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get this Lisa, and it's got to be a Mac XL because who would be doing their taxes on a Lisa? So I had to do some restoration work, but I booted it up, and it has a widget hard drive, and it's running Lisa 7.7, the Lisa OS 3.1. It's not running MacWorks. There's no MacWorks anywhere on it. It's not a Mac XL. It's a Lisa 210. And it's just kind of amazing to me that somebody was using a Lisa, running Lisa OS to do their taxes in 2012 or whenever it was. So I actually like knowing the history of my computers. I like knowing that somebody bought this brand new in 1984 or 1985, and they used it as a real computer to get work done. Especially that they used it for that long, which is pretty impressive. It's kind of a footnote in the history of Apple. It was a flop in the popular imagination. And yet there's this community of enthusiasts. And it's not a huge community. I mean, you'll find way more people collecting Apple II or Mac computers. But it's a passionate community, and it's full of people who really love the Lisa.